pray and then we'll get started for tonight. So, Father, we thank you for this opportunity we have. Thank you for this time that you gather us together. Continue to keep us in your peace and in your stead. And we think about, of course, Lainey's mom and the situation, that you would continue to sustain and give her the comfort that she needs and guidance and Lainey's strength and continual energy to care and give and love for her mother at this time. We just thank you continuously for, again, all of the situations that we have throughout. A couple of our parents out there, of course, all of us have the needs of the things that are weighing on the physical and on the just the state of mind that we're just out of our hands. We just know that we can be there where we can, but we know that you are there all the time, Lord. It's constantly the one who gave us life and sustains our life. And you would be able to have your will be unfolded to us. And we accept your measure of what you do and how you do it, and continue to learn in the process of this passage through this life is all nothing but a learning curve and understanding of to embrace more of understanding why you do what you do and how we can learn more about you and just reflect on how we can take away the things that we need to out of our lives and add the things we need to in our lives. And we're just grateful for all this process you put us through. And yet it is traumatic at times. It is very arduous at times, very weighing on our hearts and minds and souls, that we know that you tell us to cast our cares and our anxiousness, our anxieties before you because you care for us. And then you'll lift us up in due time, as you always do. So we thank you for being our sustaining, loving, and giving Father. We know we're a needy people. We ask you to have the needs of all of us put before you, and knowing that all these casting of our cares and anxieties before you, you will hear and care and address as you know is best for us. So we just want to accept that and continue to look to your will in those areas. And thank you now for also this reflection we have on Easter and Palm Sunday, and throughout these last 2 weeks, just remembering what you have continued to do and have done for us, and reminding us of your mighty work before the cross and to the resurrection and to your soon return. So we thank you for, again, being our God and our Savior, and us being your people, your children, your servants. So be with us now in the time of study. May the words of my mouth and meditations of my heart be acceptable in your sight. You are our strength, our Redeemer, our Counselor, our Shepherd, our Pastor, our coming Bridegroom. You're our resurrected Lord, the resurrection, the way, the truth, the life. So we know that all things are made possible by you, and there's no way through the Father but by you. So we ask all this, that you come to us now in this time of study and be with us in Jesus, Yeshua's name we pray. Amen. So I figured today would be a nice time, because it's the first time I've ever done a 2-week, if you haven't noticed, texting about Easter. I wanted to go through reflections of Easter in regards to Palm Sunday, crucifixion, Easter, ascensions, resurrections. So much stuff in there. So I wanted to just take time to just reflect back a little bit. Prior to our Sunday meeting we'll have on the book of Galatians, we'll have that study as a conclusion of that book. We'll do that, and then we'll have the Friday after that will be our Q&A study as well. So that's the next triptych up ahead. We're going to do our reflections today on Easter, and with 2 weeks we've been talking about that. Galatians 6, then Q&A. We'll have communion. We'll start the ARC study at that time and then go forward. So that's what's up ahead for us. So with this being said, I just, again, want to tell you that this is the first time I've been led to take the Easter texting that has been done and actually carry it through another week, because I thought it was necessary to continue the thought as they were, in that same understanding of carrying that thought forward. So I want to take some time to, again, read more about what had happened in regards to after that time. So first things first is I want to start with just, I want to spend some time in the book of John, but spend some time regarding how when Jesus came back from the dead, obviously, and was raised, it was a big wow. So we've already talked about how the Palm Sunday was a coronation of sorts, and it was like a pre-coronation to the coronation coming up in the millennial reign. That Christ, when he came in, just the only time I mentioned this on different occasions to individuals, and I think I mentioned it to all of us corporately. I can't remember. But that was a pre-coronation ceremony of him being king. And you think about the millennial reign, he'll just raise up this temple, and the angels will be singing, and the crowd will be immense, and all of us will witness the King of Kings and Lord of Lords entering into the city. And it's going to be, let's just, wow, just imagining that whole, the whole scale of it is just unfathomable, because it's the only time during his earthly ministry where he, of the four main events of his life, his birth, his crucifixion, his birth, Palm Sunday, crucifixion, resurrection. It's the only one of those four major events where he had a crowd of just lauding him, and actually for the first time giving him his just due praise. And so that crowd was a prelude of a small scale to the huge, immense magnitude of the cooling off period from Armageddon, all that death and carnage, the cooling off period, and the transition into the King is here, and long live the King. And just this whole coronation ceremony is going to be just unbelievable. So for me and for us and for just this Easter, Passover, Palm Sunday type of couple weeks here we've been through, it was always a remembrance to reflect on what will one day be the ultimate of all Palm Sundays, the ultimate of all times of worship, where he's coming in to the eastern gate of the raised temple that he has restored, not the one the Antichrist will have in the 7-year tribulation, where he's going to destroy that and raise it into the original. I mean, wow. And then walk in there and just, what a scene that's going to be. And so with that being said, you have this sense of expectation of imagine, again, that expectation that we have, the expectation that Judas had and what he had gone through, the expectation that the disciples did not have about him giving forth his life, even though he did tell them this. So I want to pick up and spend some time in John and just kind of read from there, and then kind of flash back on some things of reflections. So first, if you go to John in chapter 16, go to John in chapter 16, and I just want to remind you of, again, this is a time in Scripture where it's between the Last Supper, and he's going out to the Kidron Valley to have the prayer in John 17. It's not recorded in Matthew, Mark, and Luke that he has for his disciples. And then he's going from that point to then cross the Kidron Valley and have the Gethsemane prayer. So don't forget, there's two prayers that he had. Only people, they put the two together. They generalize it, as most people in churchianity do. They don't distinguish between two prayers that Christ had. Now, he had multiple prayers at Gethsemane. That's what it says in Scripture. He came back 3 times, found him sleeping. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that he had a prayer in Gethsemane before the Father, an intercessory prayer. But then he had an individual prayer to him and the Father, but he had intercessory prayer for the disciples before that, before he crossed the Kidron Valley. And that's only recorded in John 17, only there. Before that prayer of heartfelt, intimacy with them was being made known, this John 16 statement is being made after we talked before about the Holy Spirit and his role and this whole process about him leaving a comforter. He's not going to leave us alone. He told us that, right? He's going to help us with righteousness and sin and judgment, and guide us and counsel us and teach us and testify of him. And it's going to come from the Father, this promise. And again, the promise of the Father, meaning that the Holy Spirit is the Spirit of God the Father. And that's why he's called the promise of the Father. And so you have this statement being made. But in John 16, verse 15, he says, all things that the Father has are mine. Now, I want you to remember the scale of what's happened. Okay, so the Passover's over. It's been 6 o'clock. They had the Passover. It's probably around 8 or 9, something like that. They've gone out and they're on their way to Gethsemane. They're walking out the Mount of Olives. It's, again, not a long walk, but it's maybe 30 minutes, So they're traversing, they're singing. Judas has already betrayed him. It's a pretty interesting background. We're getting scale of reflections on Easter and Passover and Palm Sunday and the resurrection and the ascensions, right? We're just reflecting on all this. And so he's walking out and they're singing. And John gives the best picture, because John's gospel, don't forget, is the only gospel that spends so much time on the last week of Jesus. Matter of fact, again, I've mentioned this many times, but from John 13 to the end of the book, it's all about that. It's all about the last week of Jesus and the post-resurrection events. It's like no other gospel writer took that many chapters and that much space to talk about what's happened, but John does.
But one of the things that John's unique about is that he, A, gives more information and detail of what happened between the Passover and the crucifixion. And he also gives more detail about what happened post-resurrection. No one else talks about what happened after that more so than he does. And so it's interesting to look at that and understand that when you're reading the gospel writer John, which would intimate also the correlation to how he's known as the apostle that Jesus loved, and they were so close. It would make sense, being as close as he was, to always wanting to have a listening ear to the words of Christ, that he would have more to say or more to record. God would have him record more of what transpired. So it kind of makes sense in that way as well. So here you have in John 16 and verse 15, he says that all the Father has are mine. On account of this, I said, take out of mine he takes, and will declare to you. Here's the interesting verse I want to focus in on, John 16, verse 16. A little while, and you will see me no more. And again, a little while, and you'll see me. Then some of his disciples said to each other, what is this he's saying to us? A little while, and you will see me not. And again, a little while, and you will see me. And because I am going to the Father. I mean, wow. We always forget. This is not recorded anywhere else in the gospel accounts of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But in John, he makes a specific reference after the Passover. They're on their way to go have him do the intercessory prayer for them prior to the Gethsemane prayer, prior to the betrayal and the arrest in the Garden of Gethsemane, which happened at midnight. So we're probably around maybe, I don't know, maybe 10 o'clock in the evening. So you're talking a couple hours, just a few hours before the most prelude to the heart-wrenching time they're going to have with him, the crucifixion, the whole false trials and the whole crucifixion, the whole midnight on this Tuesday of Passover week, through that 9 a.m. crucifixion, through the false trials, 9 a.m. crucifixion, off the cross at 3 p.m. That whole time frame between midnight on Tuesday till 9 a.m. Wednesday and then 3 p.m. Wednesday was insanely just heart-wrenching for them. And just 2 hours before it all started, he said this, which is like, what? Say 2-3 hours before, he says, a little while you'll see me no more, and again a little while and you'll see me. And so I wanted to stop and think about, wait just a second. Do you not see the correlation between the Lord bringing about events in this world that lead to his second coming, that lead to the rapture prior to the tribulation, which is prior to Armageddon, which is prior to his second coming? Do you see him doing the similitude to us today of the same thing? Where he's telling us in a little while things are going to get worse, if you will, and then we're going to see him as in a rapture. Then you won't see him on the earth being active, because it'll go dark and hellish. And then you'll see him again. How ironic is you'll see his, not in the same exact way he's talking about here physically, but the same similitude of principle will have the Lord's will be unfolded with the first wave of a rapture, and then you won't see him for a while, and when those first 3 waves are over, the earth goes so dark, it gets ugly for a good 3 years. It's just, oh my goodness, only the Sum Medicos are left behind. Then you'll see him again come and lay forth his hand of justice upon this earth. But it's just interesting how a couple hours, just a few hours, 2, 3, he's made this statement to them about what to remember. And it really speaks to the fact that some of us deceive ourselves, and I know I won't speak to you, I'll speak to myself, and we'll say, oh, I can always be vigilant and watchful. I can always be attentive in prayer, and I can always be looking for the Lord to come. But the reality is, if these guys who followed him for 3 years couldn't get their wits together just a few hours before everything was about to domino down that path of traumatic grief, just a couple hours before that, he told them the kind of like the proof text, the syllabus was about to happen. A little while you're not going to see me, and a little while you will. Right? They just forgot about it. Totally. It's just amazing how they can forget such a poignant statement. And then they even say then, in verse 17, what is this he's saying to us? A little while you'll see me not, and then again a little while and you'll see me because I'm going to the Father. In verse 18, then they said, therefore, what is this that he is saying? A little while. We know not. You know not. He told you that he's going to go and be delivered up. Before Palm Sunday, he said, I'm going to be delivered up. So you're talking just 3 days before that, he told him, I'm going to be delivered up. A couple hours before it happens, oh, by the way, so you can see the repetitive nature of how they're being told what's going to happen until they go, I don't understand what he's saying. So the first reflection I want to have is just the similitude of how when Christ was going to be crucified and raised again, he gave a proof text of that, and still they missed it. Just like in this common nature of modern typology in the second coming, it's going to be the same way when things will go ugly, and then we'll see him again coming on this earth to make it all right. But you're going to have this sense of caught unawares, even though we've been told. So many folks act like, oh, I got it. No, we may understand it, and at best have an understanding of a general idea what's going to happen. But to sit here and act like you'll never be caught off guard, you'll never be surprised by how deep the evil goes. You won't be maybe caught in and wrapped up into how ugly it's going to get. For those people who are going to be left here, we have a lot of them act so vibrato-like, in that, the Antichrist won't affect me. They don't understand because they think they're going to be gone. And the fact they're going to be here is just, they're going to be so shocked, like these apostles were. Well, what are we doing experiencing this? What is happening? What is happening? And it's just, and then you have the second piece of reflection here, that the apostles themselves have been told on multiple occasions about way during his ministry about what was going to happen, about destroy the temple in 3 days and I'll raise it up. Talking about his own body, they said. The parable about there's the air, let's seize him. They had many occasions to understand he was talking about his own death, and yet they just let it gloss over their head. When Peter was called Satan, when he said, you don't stand between me and going to my crucifixion to pay for your sin debt, over their head. So they had multiple times during his ministry, and then at the tail end, he reminds them prior to Palm Sunday, oh, by the way, I'm going to get crucified. He reminds them on Passover day, just a few hours before he's about to be betrayed and arrested and taken to crucifixion. You're not going to see me for a while, but you'll see me again. And still, all these hints, all these direct comments, they missed it. So what is the second reflection? I would say not only is the Lord putting forth the proof text of how he does things that are unawares to us, and how there'll be a gap between his will being shown to us in a loving way between a darkness of grief, but he also shows us that we're going to be subjected to our own forgetfulness, to our own lack of vigilance. No matter how good you say you are, you're going to lose your sense of watchfulness and vigilance at times that you can't sit there and always maintain. Even a few hours before, he told them. And they just, it gets me, because on the way coming here driving or on the way home, I have this, I feel the Spirit just in my heart and in my mind and spirit, and talking and teaching. And as soon as I leave the doors, some ignorant thing happens, and I just become a total idiot. And I'm like, what is that? And it's just like here, it's just that God's just reminding us of our frailty, of the fact that we think we're better than we really are. We think we're so good at times, And I don't want to beat ourselves up or nothing like that. I just want to be honest with ourselves and say, look, man, it's okay. He loved them, and it was okay that they lost sight. It's okay that they're not able to focus, And they even said, we don't know what he's saying, verse 18. Then in verse 19 in John 16, it says, Jesus knew that they wished to ask him, and said to them, do you inquire with one another concerning this? Because I said, a little while you see me not, and again, a little while you'll see me. It's really funny, because at the same Last Supper earlier, they were talking about who's going to be the greatest. You've got to be kidding me. So during the Last Supper of our Lord, you had talked about who's going to be greater. Really? You couldn't pick another time to save that? You had to bring that up? And by the way, it's just amazing. So let me show you. I'm just going to go back on this. So it's just really insane how they have this whole conversation about where he's at and where they're at. So let me just go back and show you here. So after he's washing, let me go back into the book. I'll show you in the book of Luke where he talks about, here in just a minute. I want to show you this other piece where, again, they're discussing about who would be this. In chapter 22 of Luke, at the Last Supper, I'll look at this little snippet too. And it says in chapter 22, verse 22, for this is the Passover, right? So he says, for indeed the Son of Man is going away according to that which was been appointed, but woe to that man by whom he's delivered up. And again, they inquire amongst themselves which of them it could be who was about to do this. Now watch this, in verse 24 of Luke 22. During the Last Supper of our Lord, And there was also a contention among them, which of them should be the greatest, or thought the greatest. Are you kidding me? Are you serious right now? You're fighting over trivial, ignorant, prideful, arrogant things during the Last Supper you'll have with your Lord. Just hours from now, he's going to be betrayed and arrested, to be beaten and flogged and scourged and then be crucified. And you're discussing who's the greatest? Really? Look at how ignorant we are as a people, you know? So these reflections are just kind of like, wow, you know? It brings me a sense of like disgust with human nature, but also a sense of comfort to know, you know what, thank God that in my sinful depravity of when I make these dumb decisions, when I lose sight of things that are so easy to keep sight of, especially come out of a glorious experience. You get a glorious experience with the Lord, you get a glorious time with Him one-on-one, and you beat yourself up because you fall off the rails. And you go, but wait a minute, you know, we're just like these guys. I mean, during the Last Supper of their Lord, of our Savior, they're asking, who's going to be the greatest? Are you kidding me? He just talked about someone betraying him and being delivered up. He had washed your feet and talked about being humble. This is what you're talking about? You know, it's amazing. So go back to John 16 again. I wanted to show you that so you can see that. So in John 16, he knew they were thinking that, I don't understand what you're saying, back in John 16, verse 19, right? So he asked them about, you know, do you inquire with another concerning this? Because I said to you a little while and you see me not. And again, a little while and you'll see me. This is John 16, 19 now we're back into. Look at verse 20. He said, indeed, I assure you that you will weep and lament, but the world will rejoice. You'll be sorrowful, but your sorrow shall become joy. So not only did he tell them, a little while, you'll see me no more. And again, a little while, and you'll see me. Not only did he tell them that, he told them the fact, then he colors it in with the emotion. You're going to be tremendously sorrowful. The world's going to rejoice. Now, I would like to know at what point did they reflect themselves and finally remember this message? Because you can't tell me it was on Crucifixion Day, because it wasn't. Because you remember, they're so consumed and paralyzed in their grief on Resurrection Sunday, they didn't even have a clue about this. And he even told them, he put color in it and said, you'll be sorrowful, you'll weep, you'll lament, but the world's going to rejoice. At what point, was it when he walked in the room, which is what I think? It's when he appeared to the women individually, Mary, the mother, Mary Magdalene, road to Emmaus people, and then the room of all of them in there. At that point is when they finally went, oh yeah, yeah, wow, you said, yeah, lament, grief, yeah, and now I do have much joy. You're alive. I mean, I saw you were alive from the tomb being empty and this linen clothes lying there, but I still didn't believe it fully because I kept on. Even Mary Magdalene says, where have you laid him? Where have you laid him? Well, why would you say that when you just saw an empty tomb? Where have you taken him? Why would you ask that question? You know he's alive. So it's almost like they believed in a first-tier sense of I believe that God's word is true, but I don't fully believe with this strong faith that he can take death to life and actually be walking around. Okay, he's not there, but I don't know what that really means. So they believed, but not fully. They believed in a 1/10 state of it. It was just interesting how they believed in Christ, but not into him. So they believed like they were living in faith, but not out of faith. So it was interesting how that's a word picture of that. Remember you've asked that before to me? You said, what's it like to be living in faith versus out of faith? Well, living in faith is trusting God at his word. Living out of faith is taking that trust and actually subjecting yourself to continue to trust in him regardless of what you think, what you feel, what you experience. They weren't doing that. So they were believing but not believing into. They were living in faith but not out of faith until they saw him. And I guarantee you it wasn't until then in that room where they went, oh yeah, the lamenting thing. Remember that? Hey, Thomas, remember? Well, he wasn't there the first time, but hey, Bartholomew, Peter, do you guys remember? Yeah. James and John, oh my God. The joy, this is what he's talking about. The joy thing. Aren't you guys stoked right now? I mean, so it's amazing the reflections of What was really going through these people's minds and hearts? Yes.
Ricky said, did all of the disciples see Jesus raise Lazarus? They knew it was a possibility.
Another takeaway from that is when you talk about what you just said there, Lazarus comes in with them the Palm Sunday, and yes, they all saw him raised from the dead. They were all there. They saw him raise Jairus' daughter as well. And so they see this. They have him, but Lazarus was the one he raised emphatically, who was definitively not just dead for that day, but for 4 days. That was the most definitive resurrection, because it wasn't just a raising of someone who had died. He had been dead. Okay, so you're right about Lazarus. They were all there. They saw him. And on Palm Sunday, he comes into town. As a matter of fact, if you recall, I pointed out to you before on Palm Sunday where the high priests and Sadducees and scribes, they wanted to take Lazarus out because they're like, oh boy, here comes the Yahoo now. And they're all like clamoring to him. If that's not bad enough, the Lazarus guy's in tow. The number one exhibit A evidence that he has the power over death and he is the resurrection and the life is walking right over there. We need to take that guy out. We can't. Everybody knew he died. Everybody knew he was dead for 4 days. We can't have this brother walking around. This is not cool for us. Doesn't help our narrative. We need to eliminate him from the equation. So they want to kill Lazarus as well as Jesus that week. They weren't just looking at killing Jesus. They wanted to take out Lazarus too. He's a walking evidence of their narrative that's anti their narrative. He's not the Messiah. He doesn't have the power. He's a charlatan. Well, that can't be true if everybody knows this guy's dead and he's walking around. Because they saw it. Not just the apostles, but a ton of people. That was like their go-to of, oh yeah, this guy here was dead and he's walking around, and that's what's up. And they were like, so they didn't like that, right? So all this evidence they had, and it's just interesting how, and he says in verse, again, 21 about you'll have joy, but look at the verse chapter 16 of John, verse 21. The woman, when she is in labor, has sorrow, because her time has come, and when she has borne the child, she remembers the distress no more, on account of the joy that a woman the joy that a man was born into the world. And you therefore now indeed have sorrow, he says in verse 22. My page sticking together, sorry. But I will see you again, and your heart shall rejoice, and your joy no one takes from you. Now that's awesome. And your joy no one takes from you. And this is where I wanted to always remind people that what I said when I went through my traumatic experience of my 7 deaths in 7 weeks and the whole traumatic thing with guns pointing at my face and all this other kind of malarkey. But I thought that people can take your peace, from you because they're being evil and malicious, and it's not true. Jesus said, this is, by the way, wait. This is before the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, and he said, no one takes your joy from you, which means you and me, we give it away. So don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to God and go, oh gosh, that person's so evil. Those Romans are such jerks, man. The Jewish people feeding the crowd with the crucifixion chant. They took our Messiah from us, and the same way they're taking our joy from us. That's what we do. We make a true statement. They're taking the Messiah away, but not really, because he said he was laying his own life down, and that was his intent. So were they really taking him away, or was he giving his life away? He was giving it away, right? But we like to, twist the narrative to fit the agreements with our soul, that we want to believe that someone took our joy because we don't want to own the two principal truths. God ordains, and we have a responsibility to fight for that truth that he gave us and not accuse the situation of being in control. God is. And 2, not to blame someone else for losing our sense of walking in spirit. That's on us. No one takes our joy, which means they gave it away because they did have their joy lost for a time. And he talks about that. Your heart will be rejoiced, and your joy will no one take from you. So he told them this because, again, when he saw them, he breathed on the Holy Spirit, and later on, the Holy Spirit then indwelt in them at Pentecost. But not now, and certainly not when he breathed on them. He was the presence of the Holy Spirit. And he said, okay, the presence is with you now. You've seen me. Now your joy no one takes from you. He hadn't indwelled yet. And so it's just really interesting for me to see all these takeaways and reflections on this time when they had so many clues and so many direct statements about, I'm going to go away, I'm going to come back, you're going to have sorrow, it's going to be joy, don't worry about it, and they still lost it. Yes?
Vicky said, he also said, I will be with you always.
That's right. I'll be with you always. But that when you're, yes. But he did say earlier in John, I'm going to leave you and give you, I'm not going to leave you alone, give you a comforter. When he said be with you always, you're referring to, in Matthew, the famous, what they call the Great Commission, but that's actually, the famous Great Commission is going to be that which is, let me see here, when he says, and verse 20, teaching them to observe all things which I have enjoined upon you, and behold, I am with you all the days till the consummation of the age. So he's with them all the time. So that's in Matthew, 28:20, but that's at the end of his post-resurrection. But in John, we found earlier that he did say that he's going to leave them. But he says, right here, he says in John 14, in verse 27, he says, well, before that, let me see here. In verse 26, so, but the help of the Holy Spirit which the Father will send, John 14:26, but the help of the Holy Spirit which the Father will send in my name shall teach you all things and remind you of all things which I said to you, because I leave to you my peace. I give to you, not as the world gives, but I give to you, let not your heart be troubled, nor let it be afraid. For you heard that I said to you, I'm going away, and I am coming to you. If you loved me, you would rejoice that I am going to the Father, because my Father is greater than I. But he goes on and says, and now I have told you before it occurs, so that when it occurs, you may believe. I will not speak much more with you, for the ruler of this world is coming, and has nothing in me. But the world may know that I love the Father, and as the Father commanded me, even so I do. Arise, let us go hence. So then that's when they left the supper and started walking out. So at the end of the supper, he tells them he's going to leave, but for a time, but not leave them alone. To your point, the Holy Spirit's going to come and be their helper. And by the way, you should want that, because my going to the Father is essential for us to be one in really closeness as we're looking. So he's really laying out the blueprint of, and it's really resonating to me about how our walk in our sinful fleshly nature is manifest in this life, in these last days. We can know all we need to know. We can talk about all we need to talk about the things that are true. And without that, we don't have a shot of being in the right place in position spiritually to be pleasing to him. It's not about saying this is the things you have to do and you will be in the right position. It's not about that. It's about knowing what you have to do, knowing what you're supposed to do, and doing those things and thinking about those things, but also giving yourself some latitude to realize you're going to have a lot of hiccups. The apostles, in the day and hours before his crucifixion and his betrayal and his arrest and his resurrection, during the whole process, were reminded, were told, and told again. And did they respond well to that? No. No. Did they have dementia or something? No. They had Alzheimer's or amnesia, memory loss? No. So why did they forget? What does it speak to? Our sinful nature, that the emotions of the moment, the distractions of the circumstance consume us so much that the truth of God's word is squelched. And now you know what he means by in Ephesians when he says, quench not the Holy Spirit. Don't quench him. Don't quench him. He's there to remind you. Don't let the emotions of the circumstance. And boy, do I need to learn a lesson from that on a large scale. Boy, do I stand guilty as charged as a poster child for those who in Christ who forget this principle. I forget this principle all the time. Not letting my emotions and the circumstance of a bad situation get so out of hand that no one takes much, but I begin to give it away. That I begin to quench the Spirit of Christ by the Holy Spirit, because I am holding loosely to God's truth and holding more and allowing myself to be paralyzed by a situation, by the emotion of the moment, and not letting God's truth be my strength. I've heard somebody say to me, God's word is not enough. I need practical solutions. Okay, that is an ignorant statement to make, because the practical solutions, by you saying that, you're saying that God's truth is secondary to the emotion and circumstance that's paralyzing my thoughts. That's paralyzing my way of thinking and feeling and be able to do the things I need to do in my life. If God's word wasn't more valuable than what I think and feel and experience, please explain that to Jesus when he was going through what he went through for you. Explain it to Apostle Paul when he was in prison and beaten and scourged and shipwrecked and naked and stoned to death almost. I mean, it was enough for those people of sinful nature and of God himself that that's what sustained them. Jesus in the wilderness being tempted, the word of God, he didn't have any food. That was his nourishment, right? He was weakened, but that's what he trusted on, not what everything else existentially. So it's just amazing for me to see how he was going through, again, in the book of John, back in chapter 16, these things he was telling them about what was about to happen. And I just want to reflect on that sense a little bit and go, wow. You know what? Don't beat yourself up so much when you go, boy, this last week, or I remember those years of my life knowing the Lord, I really wasn't focused on. It's okay. Or gosh, we had a great time on Sunday, and then later on I was just acting like a horse's batoot. Boy, I'm not worthy. None of us are. He understands that. So when he says, count, deem yourself, those who are deemed worthy to obtain the resurrection, right? What he's talking about is not us jockeying for looking at the existential. To be deemed worthy, to be found privileged to stand with him, is about holding true to his truth. How much fight do we have in us to fight to hold his truth in our mind and in our heart? That's why people write songs about it and tell stories about people in their dementia, Alzheimer's state, and they forget who you are. Your loved ones don't recognize you. But what can they do? Sing a hymn like nobody's business. They'll say, Rock of Ages, cleft for me. Oh, I hide myself. They'll know the words. You're like, but you don't know who I am. But they know those words. They know Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. How do you know these things? So God's truth transcends their own neurological diagnosis of dementia, right? They'll remember those things. It's amazing. And yet here in this sense of being worthy to obtain, to be deeming to be standing with him, to be counted in that place of being blessed and happy and have our first portion of the resurrection, it comes back to not trying to jockey for what existentially we present ourselves as unto him or unto mankind. But it comes from the internal disposition that we have to say, do I really understand the pillars of God's truth in such a way where whether I do or do not subject myself to them, whether I do or do not align with them, whether I do or do not keep steady on my path, because God knows that I will not. Just like my brethren and my apostles that led before me, who on the foundation of the holy city, these yahoos forgot, lamented, consumed, paralyzed in fear, grieving so much they didn't want to believe, and they were told, and they were told, and they were told, and they were told, and they were told. And they just forgot. The lesson is we now have the indwelling, like they would later have the indwelling of the Holy Spirit to remind us, and the Spirit of Christ to remind us the truth. That was the lesson to be learned here. That's why he exposed them to this, so that we wouldn't have to go through this experience that they'd have to go through, that they would have a better source of strength to draw from to deal with this situation of how do I deal with all of these things that I'm going to fall short of God's accountability he has for me. It's not about living up to his expectations. It's about holding true to what I know is true. Holding true to what I know is true, in lieu of the fact I may and may not live up to expectations. There's times I will, and there's times I won't live up to what the Word of God wants me to do. That's not the point. You don't measure yourself by that. You measure yourself by, but do I hold fast to the truth and the pillars of God's Word? Do I know, coming back to what right looks like, do I come back home again to that center of peace that he said, no one takes my joy. No one takes my joy. Wait a minute. No one takes my joy. Not the enemy, not Satanas, not Diabolos, not Paneros. No one takes my joy. Not the person who abuses me, who insults me, manipulates me, who speaks evil against me. No one takes my joy. You mean the person I love most who just betrayed me? No one takes my joy. No one. Because my joy is from the Lord, right? Babe used to say, I can't bring you happiness. Your happiness comes from God. It's true. But you can contribute to it, right? Or take away from it. You can contribute or be a distractor of happiness, but you're not the source of it. And that's the whole thing. The source of our happiness is supposed to be Christ so much that what's happened is in our life, we get distracted because people can contribute or distract from our happiness, and that then becomes what we think is our source of happiness. The distraction or the contributor becomes the blame of I'm not happy, or the contributor to why I am happy. When God's going, no, you're missing the point. Living in my blessings or living under a consequence of your sin does not take away or contribute to your happiness, as therefore making them the source of your happiness. They contribute or take away, but your source of your happiness, your source of your joy is always to be Him. Always to be Him. Always to be Him. And how funny it is that we look at our children, our grandchildren, our husbands, our wives, right? And you say, boy, they're the source of my happiness. No, they contribute to your happiness. Your source of your happiness is your Lord. And it should be. And that's the focus too, is that they didn't really have the essence of who He was understood. We know that because they didn't understand who He was, right? They even said that. Whereas here you have this sense of later on, and I want to show you, and then they would see later on that, oh, now they come to understand what's happening. So remember this as you go back. I'm going to go back and read this to you as well. Let me show you. Let me see here. There's a piece where they say that. Okay, here we go. So going back to John chapter 12 and verse 16, they didn't believe in who He was. They believed in Him, who He was. They didn't understand it fully. So because they didn't understand it fully, their joy was easily taken from them. So how do I get my joy no one take from me? How do I fight for something if I don't know it fully? The more I understand and know what my joy is based on, the person, the better I have a chance to fight for that joy. So no one takes it from me because I have a better, firm foundation on who He is. So they had an idea of what He represented to them, but they missed who He really was and His mission and His purpose and His threefold office. And in John 12:16, they even say, right after Palm Sunday, they said, now these things His disciples knew not at first, but when Jesus was glorified, then they remembered that these things had been written about Him, and they did these things to Him. What? John 12:16. And then they remember. So it's evident that their foundation on the truth was what it meant to them, what their perception of it was, but not the depth of it. So your joy of not being taken from you is directly related to the depth of your knowledge of the Word of God. For folks who go, oh my gosh, studying is a bunch of malarkey, and it's worthless and it's needless, and I think you're just really saying that just to be an arrogant person, and it's just all about the love. You can't love unless you obey, God says, John 14:21. And you certainly can't obey as well as you need to if you don't have all the knowledge from what is required of you to do. And if you don't have the knowledge of and if you do have the knowledge of what's required of you to do, what happens is you grow more strength and more roots, like a tree firmly planted. You grow more roots in understanding who it is you believe in and what His agenda is and who He really is, so that then you have a stronger, better chance to make sure your joy is not taken from you, because your joy is related to the truth and the veracity, how deep it runs into your soul. And that's related into even more solidifying to when the more you dwell in that, abide in that world of abiding and obeying His word, the more you sense His love. All that falls into how you're able to fight for your joy. And these disciples, they were having the idea of what He represented, but they forgot what His person was, that His purpose was to come and live and die and then come back again. They wanted the purpose of Him to be held up in such a way that they missed the person. The purpose that they saw in Him was missed by what God's purpose was, because they missed the person of who He was being at this point, was prophet, to die for them. Yes?
I said, I wonder why in verse 16 they jump forward to after Jesus' resurrection in John 12.
Yeah, that's because John is the only one of all the gospel writers. I thought about that too, brother, what you just said. Why did they jump ahead like that to an event that was like, it's Palm Sunday, and he's jumping ahead to, Crucifixion Wednesday. Goodness gracious. And he's actually jumping ahead twofold: Crucifixion Wednesday and glorification of Him being seen later on, of being raised from the dead. I would argue even on Sunday, Saturday night. or Sunday night, excuse me, Sunday night. So, well, Saturday midnight he wrote, they didn't see him until Sunday night. So the reality is it's really interesting how, like you said, the reason why, and I think the reason is because he's the only one who records that they fell before him. When they were looking, as I mentioned before, that's when it says they were looking to kill Lazarus up in verse 10. I mentioned that to you. There's 12:10 looking to kill Lazarus. But when they came to betray him in the garden, he's the only one who says that when they did this, he says, I am. So just trying to remember this. If you go over to in John 14, not 14, excuse me, John 18. So in John 18, when they ask him in the garden, and then verse 4 of chapter 18, Jesus, therefore, knowing all things that were coming upon him, going out, says to them, whom do you seek? Because the band of officers came. And they answered him, Jesus the Nazarene. And he says, I am Jesus. And that Judas also who delivered him up was standing with him. When therefore he said to them, I am, they went back and fell to the ground. Now, I'm sorry, but that would freak me out. If I'm an apostle, I'm going, what just happened? I mean, no one else records that. Matthew, Mark, Luke, 0. John points out the deity. So I think the reason why John points out earlier in John chapter 12, as much as he does in John 18, John wants to point out the deity of our Lord and our Savior, Yeshua Mashiach, Jesus Christ. He wants to point out the deity, that it is God Almighty, and we didn't see it. Right in front of our face, and we didn't see it. We didn't see it, man. We didn't see it. So when you all talk about, I missed God's hand today in my life, or I wasn't grateful for God's love in my heart today, he goes, listen, man, I was right there. I didn't see it. I missed it. I missed it totally. That's his whole point. That's why he brings it up, because he wants to emphasize the grandness of his deity, God Almighty, and Mashiach, right there. And we didn't understand it. Ah! How can we miss that? How can we miss it? Even Philip's like, show us the Father. I mean, we all make fun of him, but it's like they were all thinking the same thing about who's the greatest at the Last Supper. We weren't focused. We weren't focused. We weren't vigilant. We weren't watchful to what he has been telling us and told us and again and again and again. And he showed us at the Gethsemane. I am. They all, because I couldn't imagine the sound of those soldiers all taking a knee or falling backwards. That's awesome. And the apostles are going, that's pretty cool. And he goes, rise. I can just see them going, we got to arrest this guy now? He just pretty much told us that he's like the one. This is the Jewish guard. So this isn't like the Roman guard. This is the Jewish guard. Hearing him say, I am. They're like, I don't feel good about this. I can imagine them having some conversation going, yeah, man. I just took a knee and involuntarily because he said he was, I am. And that's kind of like a wow moment. So John pointed out because he's reflecting on the finiteness of mankind compared to the infiniteness of God, and how even in the midst of his presence being unfolded to us, there's so much we miss. This is why people say, why do you Bible study? It's the same old story. Why do you want to hear Lisa messages? It's the same old story. No, it's not. It's always different. There's always something new you can glean and understand and learn from God's Word because of these type of things. The apostles themselves said, we lived it, we saw it, we experienced it, and guess what? We missed it. We missed it. We missed it, man. He's right there. He's right there. Smiling, loving us, Palm Sunday, taking in the joy. We missed it. None of us understood what was going on until afterwards. We were like, oh yeah. You imagine how they must have beat themselves up, or how they must have had later on some jokes about it, maybe? Some jested comments about it, like, gosh, what were we thinking, man? Do you remember that time when he said about the temple, and he did it? We said, what were we thinking? He did what he said. We were right there. We heard him say it. We didn't, but we were all caught up in our grief and lamented. He told us he's going to not be with us for a while and see him again. He told us we're going to weep and lament and have joy. He told us. And we just didn't get it. He showed us that before he was betrayed that he's in full control. Full control. They fall down. And we still didn't get it. We thought that the Jews are controlling our fate. The Romans were controlling his fate. When he the whole time showed us, he's got this, man. He's in full control. I don't care what you see. I can care less what your eyes tell you. Your eyes are liars. Your heart's a liar. Your brain's a liar. It wants to lie to you. What you think, what you feel, what you experience. Lies. Lies. He goes, listen to what he said. That's the truth. That's why he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He wasn't saying this to have a filler. When he says the truth, he means only in him can you trust what he says and who he is. That's who you can trust to guide you. Not a person, not a situation, not your feelings, not your eyes, what the truth is. I always laugh when somebody says, trust your eyes. No. No. Why not? Trust your heart. Really? It's deceitfully wicked. Who can know it? Trust my eyes, by the way. That's why magicians exist. Illusionists exist for a reason, to prove to us your eyes suck. Your eyes cannot tell you what's true or not, because magicians and illusionists will constantly prove to you that your eyes are pathetic. That'll make you believe things that aren't true. Why trust your eyes? Why trust your heart? It says who? Where's that in here? Where's that at? Where does it say that? Trust in the Lord. I do read that. Right? Trust in his word. I do read that. So it's just amazing how the reflections here are about that basic premise of trusting in him and trusting in his word, how huge and immensely important that is, and how the apostles were calling themselves out. And John's in the spirit of this saying, you know what? I got to tell you guys, it's like he's writing. Imagine him writing this, thinking about, the Holy Spirit's dictating to him as the vehicle that God used to write his word was man, and he's writing through John's hand what to write. And I can imagine John thinking, boy, whoever's going to read this is really going to think of us as a bunch of, horses batoots for not getting this. He's going to probably think, boy, or maybe he didn't think that. Maybe he's thinking, boy, how did we miss all this? It's just so true. Gosh, we missed all of this. Wow. He gave us so many clues. The room was filled with the answers to the problem. The solution was right in front of us. Himself was right there, and we just didn't get it. We didn't fully grasp the truth. This is why you go back in Bible studies, what you go back and reflect for. This is why doing the feast days of the Jewish tradition was important, because you would reflect and you would grab onto what was true, and always remember that in lieu of whatever's happening at the moment. Don't forget what is true. Don't forget who is true. Don't forget what is true. Don't forget who is true. Don't forget what is true. Don't forget who is true. Regardless of who's in control, so you think. God's in control. Don't let yourself feel the way you feel when you know how God feels about you. He loves you. He's looking out for you. He strives and pursues you and me. He wants us to succeed. Here's the thing though, he causes us to experience failures on the path to success, to test our resolve, to build our resiliency, to remember that no one takes your joy. So in John 16, again, he goes back and you look into, in verse 23, after he says that no one takes your joy, John 16, there's two reflections. And in that day you will ask me nothing. And in that day you'll ask me nothing. Indeed, I assure you, whatever you may ask the Father in my name, he will give you. And in that day you will ask me nothing. You see that? In what day? The day where he says to him in verse 22, and you therefore now indeed have sorrow, but I will see you again, and your heart will rejoice, and the joy no one takes from you. And in that day, what day? The day you'll see me again. The day I walk in to the room. The day after resurrection morning, Sunday night, the walls are walls, their windows are shut, the door is locked, and he just walks in, and they go, oh, it's a ghost, a spirit. No, it is I. Touch and feel my hands. I'm flesh and bone. Does a spirit have flesh and bone? And they doubt. In Luke 24, he says, really? Do you have any food? They're like, yeah. And he eats, just to prove to them, I ain't a ghost. I'm real deal. And so it's interesting here when he says, and that day, the day you see me in the resurrected body, all of you beholding me, except for Thomas. Later on, he would 8 days later. But in that day, you will ask me nothing. Why is that? Because I believe that speaks to the fact, just like when he said, when the bridegroom is with you, there's no need to fast. He's with you the whole time. They're so consumed with the truth. He is the way, the truth, and the life. They're so consumed with him, there's no need to ask him anything. Because you're just basking like the Mary and Martha principle of one who's cooking and one who's waiting at his feet. You're just basking in the presence of God. You need to ask him nothing. You will ask me nothing because you're just basking in the shock of it all, and the moment of it all, and the joy of it all. But whatever you do, whatever you may ask the Father in my name, he will give you. Wow. It's pretty awesome. Then in verse 24, it says, till now you ask nothing in my name. Ask and you shall receive so that your joy may be completed. Now that's interesting too. So he says your joy is on the basis of the truth of who he is and what he has said. But to make your joy to come to full maturity, you have to ask the Father in his name. Your joy big. In other words, on the basis of what you know he says, on the basis of who you know he is, that brings you joy. From that joy, then you bring it to a full maturity by asking out of that premise of truth, whatever's on your heart and mind and soul and spirit that God puts on your heart and mind, soul and spirit, ask the Father in Jesus' name. That's a good thing. That brings your joy to completion. That brings your joy to mature. That's how you mature. You say, I don't understand. Because when you ask things to God the Father on the basis of what you know the truth is and who you know the truth is, and you have those things asked to him and then they come to fruition, what does that teach you? That you've tapped into the will of God. That your mind is being transformed by the will of God. That you're asking the very things that he's ordained before time. That's his way of giving you aha moments. My assistant at work calls it God winks. It's his way of telling you that he's in your life intimately engaged. And not only that, but he's causing your mind to think like his mind. For those little moments in time, he's given you koinonia fellowship. He's given you tight-knit intimacy with him to think like he thinks. To ask the very thing he's already ordained to give you anyways. To ask and think the very thing is already orchestrated to happen anyways. Oh, that's awesome. And what's that do to me and you? It makes our joy even more matured. Because now I see it in action in my world of my time and emotions. And it just like this feeds the beast of the spirit inside me, this growing spirit, like, wow, it's awesome. I love it. It just feeds your spirit. Like this, wow, that confirmation. So he says, these things I have spoken to you in figures. An hour is coming when I will no more speak to you in figures, but I will tell you plainly about the Father. 16, verse 25. Again, another reflection about Easter and about the Palm Sunday and about the resurrection. When he taught on the road to Emmaus, all the things spoken about him in the Psalms and the prophets. Remember I said there's not a direct reference to him in all the books, but he said in all the books they testify of him. People say, oh, God's word is direct. Is it? Is it? Because Jesus said himself, he himself isn't direct. He said, I didn't speak to you plainly, but I will. What? So much for churchianity telling me that God's always direct. Is he? Always direct? Jesus said he's not. He's not. So again, it goes back to another validation that God's word is not meant to be direct. It's meant to be studied, meant to be evidence gathered to understand him putting together for you the understanding of what the conclusion is of the matter. So here he says, in that day you will ask in my name. I will not say that I will entreat the Father for you, for the Father himself loves you because you have loved me, and I have believed that I came out from God, and I came out from the Father and have come into the world. Again, I leave the world and am going to my Father. His disciples said to him, behold, you are speaking plainly and without a figure. Well, now he is. He just said what was going to happen, right? And they still forgot. How many times has he got to tell him he's leaving? How many times has he got to tell him he's going to the Father? How many times has he got to tell him that it's okay, I love you. It's okay. And they still didn't get it. Yes.
Pam said, are the figures referring to the parables?
Yes. Yeah. When he said, I spoke to you, and that's a good comment. When he said, I spoke to you in figures, he's speaking of the parables.
Vicky said Proverbs 2 also.
Proverbs 2. I'm not sure with that one. But, yeah, so he's basically...
Pam said, why didn't he use the word parable?
Well, so let's see here. Let me go back. And so if you look, go back to Matthew 13. And you see the...
And Pam said, what does that word figures mean?
Yeah, so you look at, so I'm going to show you. It's the same word. I want you to see it. That's why I want you to, so go to Matthew. It's just the interpretation in English. Go to Matthew in chapter 13 and verse 10. And he says in verse 10 of Matthew 13, then the disciples approaching said to him, why dost thou speak to them in parables? The word parable there is parabolias. You see that? On Matthew 13, verse 10, left side of your margin. It's the last word on the left side. If you see that, okay. Now go back over to John when he says figures, and look at that word. It's not the same exact word. It says para. You see it says para, or para. It's a similar. It's not the same. So parabolias. This one is parulias. It's not. So bola means to cast. Bola means to cast, whereas para means alongside, so alongside to cast. So it's alongside, para, but instead of to cast, it's alongside to, I forgot what the wording here, but it's a similitude, not the same exact word, but it's the same thought process. He's putting forth symbols and allegories and stories. That's what it's talking to. But even though a parabole is parabola, the cast alongside of, this is para, go back to what the word I just read it to you.
Vicky said P-A-R-O-I-M-I-A.
Parouias, because this is a homeous and homeos. Remember that? It means to be compared to or simile. So he's talking about figures, meaning something that's not cast, bola, but para, alongside resembling, alongside likened unto. So he's talking about figures, meaning he's putting forth symbolisms. He's putting forth allegory. He's putting forth metaphors. So parable is he's adding truth alongside truth. That adds meat to the bones. Whereas this word, I can't if I said it correctly here, it's periuias is a word that means to alongside, similar to. So it's the para, and then homeouas, to be similar or likened unto. So he's talking about alongside, likened unto, or again, a symbol, a metaphor, a allegory, things like that. So he did talk like that, right? So that's what he's talking to when he says figures. Good question. Hope that answers your question. I'm not sure. I should have looked up the word prior to and actually had it really more ironclad and mapped out for you, but that's what that's talking about there.
Pam said, yep.
So when he says, but they said to him, hey, you behold, now you're speaking plainly and without a parable or a symbol or similar or a simile. It says in verse 30, now we know that thou knowest all things and hast no need that anyone should ask thee. But by this we believe that thou did come out from God. Jesus answered to them, do you now believe? Now again, how many times in this chapter has he told him he's going to leave? From verse 16 on, there's like 5 times he told him, I'm going to leave, I'm going to leave, I'm going to leave, I'm going to leave. You're not going to be alone. I'm going to leave, I'm going to leave, right? So in verse 32, behold, an hour is coming and has come that you will be scattered, everyone to his own home, and will leave me alone. And yet I am not alone, because the Father is with me. These things I have spoken to you, that in me you will have peace, and in the world you have affliction. But be of good cheer. I have conquered the world. I have overcome the world. Yes?
And Todd said, that's correct, Vicki. That's why you mentioned the proverb.
That's right. So it's just interesting how and this is, by the way, another color for people say, what happened to the apostles when they scattered except for John? Where did they go? Well, Jesus tells you they went to their own homes. So think about that. There's some more color to the story. So when he was betrayed and arrested and then beaten and flogged and crucified, and then what happened? They went to their own homes. Which means for the Passover, they went to their own homes. They didn't celebrate Passover together at one home for those Sabbath days. They celebrated Passover together proper on the meal with Jesus, with Yeshua. But the Sabbath day observance, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, they went to their own homes. Really speaks to a different imagery, doesn't it? And then they met again, and then they went back, and then when Passover was over and the women went out to go, they had like a meeting place they all met at, which means if Jesus said they went to their own homes after he was in verse 32, an hour is coming, you'll be scattered, everyone to his own home, and you'll leave me alone. So they went to their own homes to observe the Sabbaths of Thursday, Friday, Saturday of the Sabbath and unleavened bread, and the Passover Sabbath Thursday, unleavened bread Sabbath Friday, and the regular Sabbath on Saturday. After that was over, they then meet at their meeting place where they're all gathered together, and the women who had earlier went to go meet him in the morning to embalm him, they come back and tell the story. And they're like, what? So it's amazing how now it brings more color of what was going on. So imagining, again, it brings more reflections of they were enduring the grief of their lamenting, of their mourning with their own families during the Sabbath days of Passover, unleavened bread, and the standard Sabbath. They were in their own homes with their own families. And when that was over, they then went back to meet again, and they're in this room when he appears. It just brings more color to the story of, boy, they really didn't have like a pointing of a finger situation. It was more their own self-reflections of what they own. It's when you all see an event happen, when you see a very demonstrative event happen like that, then you go back to your own home. You're left to your own thoughts and your own devices of your 3-year journey with him from your perspective as an apostle, your memories of what he said and what he did. And you're left with that to reflect on those things. And then after that, they came together. Then after that, he appears to them. So it's really interesting how Jesus adds more to the reflections of what was going on. So which really speaks to the inward introspection we have as our own walk of faith. That we look introspectively in our times of sorrow and grief. Look introspectively, but not for the purpose of bringing down, for the purpose of finding our joy and being rooted in our joy. Because he said that obviously they weren't looking introspectively for the right result. Their result was still in mourning and grief and paralyzed in their fear, and we mentioned in the resurrection. This is what was happening. So it's just interesting to me, the reflections of the Easter Passover week, that you have all these remembrances of him telling them, I'm coming back, I'm coming back, coming back, coming back, coming back. And they didn't even get it. So then I want to fast forward now, so that there's the prayer in John 17, there's betrayal. Then fast forward over to John chapter 21, where John then talks about the end of the story that everybody else leaves out of the other gospel accounts. So I wanted to read that one piece from John 16 about what really was going on and his recall to them and his emphasis to them about, I'm going to go away, I'll be back. The emphasis of how we can just be caught up in the moment and the emotions and our thoughts and miss the truth of who he is and what he has said. But he tells us that your joy no one takes from you. He told them multiple times, and yet it's okay if we, like them, forget, even though God just told us. We can read a verse, know what it said, and go out and do the very thing it said not to do, or not do the thing we're supposed to do. We're like, how can I do that? Because you're just like these guys here. You're just like them. They were told how many times in John 16? How many times? And they didn't know. And even John points out, we didn't know. We didn't. It's brutal. We didn't know. But you know what? He never said, told you so. He never came in the room, resurrection Sunday night, and said, suckers. Never. He walks in like everything's cool. It's all fine. I love you. Really? But you know darn well our hearts are filled with ignorance of fear and lamenting, and now we're filled with joy now seeing you, but you know that before this we were all like, And reflecting back now, what you've told us, that we look kind of ignorant, don't you think? I'm sure inside Jesus would say, well, I mean, true, I told you all these things. True, you didn't believe, you didn't know, and you were in your own grief, paralyzed in fear. True, 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 true. All that's behind us now, though, isn't it? Yeah, but it's still true. He's like, do you see me holding you accountable to it? No. Do you see me loving you with joy and peace and accepting you and telling you it's okay? Yeah, that's what's freaking us out. I don't get it. Why wouldn't you say something? By the way, he said 0, didn't he? He didn't say, remember when? I've told you this 1,000 times. How many times do we say that to somebody? How many times do you say that? Do I say that to somebody? Right. I told you this before. I already went over this with you. He never had the attitude. When he, of all people, could have and should have had the attitude. I mean, how much more? He had to be hurt by it, right? He didn't show any of that. It's an amazing, a lot of reflections about how he treats us as our Father, how we sell him short. We say we believe he loves us, but do we really believe he loves us in the way that he shows it to us with evidence in Scripture of how he did not, literally, love says, I hold no records of wrongs. He is love. God is love. 1 Corinthians 13 is a description of him, not the emotion, him. He holds no records of wrongs. Did he prove that in Resurrection Sunday night? Yes. Doesn't have a party spirit or vainglorious. He could have said, I told you, suckers. I was going to happen. I did. I told you. Nope. He just walks in. I love y'all. How y'all doing? They're like, but we just let you down. Like, so many times. Isn't funny. It's like, it's okay. Yes.
Todd said, it's in your chart book.
Yeah, I know, right? well, hey. So it's just an amazing thing here. So, and chapter 21 of book of John, as we end this time of reflections here. So I love that the very verse, the verse is before we get into chapter 21. Remember Thomas, who comes and gets this bad knock I mentioned on the Easter Sunday message, that he just wanted to see Jesus. People mock him and go, doubting Thomas. Wait. No. Read the story of the women and read the story of the apostles again and tell me that they believed without seeing and knowing it was him they saw. Go on. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. None of them believed into him and lived out of faith what they should have done when they just saw the empty tomb. Did they see the angels tell them and hear them say they hear the ground shake and everything? They believed? Yes. Did they believe out of faith? Did they believe into him? No. Not until they saw him did they go, oh. And the apostles, same way. They believed. They ran to the tomb. Peter and John, see it. Come back. Still like, Then they see him and they're like, oh. So Thomas is going, dude, what makes me any different? I want to see him too. Why am I the schmuck? Why are you looking at me like I'm the bad guy? I'm just like all of you. I want to see him too. What's wrong with that? Lay off. All these church Sandy folks want to sell him down the river. Lay off. He's just saying, I'm like the rest of you. Stop lying. All of us wanted to see him before we then could go, okay, that settles it for me. All of us were in that same boat. Well, it was just me who wanted. Don't stop. That's a lie. We were all like that. I wasn't there, and now I'm there, so relax. But you know what, though? I love how the Lord knew ahead of time the ignorance of Christianity is going to blackball this guy and black sheep this guy. So what does God do with Thomas? Of all the people, women and men alike, he's the only one it's recorded of who says, my Lord and my God. He makes the pronouncement clear. He's given that reference of that statement that no one else has but him. I think it's God's way of saying, stop picking on him. I saved the best for last. The statement of all statements you need to know. Not the person, but the statement that I want to make him say. Because I want you to know, encapsulated in this one statement, 8 days later, is what all of you were basically saying. That I am your Lord and your God. But I made it channeled through him. So you wouldn't pick on him because he was the last one to see me. he made the most profound statement of all of you when he saw me, that I am his Lord and his God, in verse 28. And then, of course, Jesus makes his powerful statement. Blessed are those who have believed and not seen me. Then, of course, in verse 30 and 31 of John 20, he says that indeed many other signs Jesus performed in the presence of the disciples, which have not been written in this book. Yowza. Many other signs. And they say that in verse 31, but these have been written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. How many more miracles did he really perform that weren't recorded? Wow. There's so many in here we think are awesome. And John's saying, there's a lot more. So it really makes me think of intimate miracles he may have done. Think about this. They walked with him for 3 years. They lived in a traveling band of like a nomadic state, living in, housing wherever someone would give them a place to house and abide. But you have to think there was moments where maybe John might say, I got a splinter. Jesus said, no, you don't. Oh, I had a splinter. Thank you for taking that. I mean, how many miracles did I stubbed my toe. It hurts. He goes, it's fine. And they go, hey, the pain's gone. Thanks. How many other miracles did he do that were just so small and trivial to us? Well, to him, I should say. But to us, we're like, to the apostles who walked intimately with him. How many times did they say, oh, my stomach is rumbling. I got a sore stomach. Lord, my digestive tract is really, and he goes, you're good. Hey, it's gone. Yeah, I know. Thank you. How many miracles like that? How many little things did he do? Who knows, right? I think John's speaking to not just the open things he did, but the more intimate things he did with them, those 12. How many favors he did for them, little things that were just like so intimate, so unique to just showing him his love for them, his care for them. Yes?
Todd said in the book of John or the entire New Testament?
Well, remember, John's the book that lists the 7 I ams, that I am the way, the truth, the life, I am the door, I am the light, I am the resurrection and the life. So in context to the book of John is what he's talking about, to your point. But in the fact that the book of John presents him as God Almighty, that's his presentation of Yeshua. Therefore, I would, just like in the book of Revelation, it says, don't add the things in this book or the plagues of this book be added to you. But the argument is, well, the book deals with all future things and encompasses reflections on past things, on how future things will be fulfilled, and the premise of old things that happened and prophecies yet to be fulfilled. So the fact that it covers an entire span of past, present, and future, don't you think that potentially the inference there is it would apply to all books, even though it's so specific to this book? And you go, I would think so, right? And then when you go to the book of John, he's dealing with, no, there's more things written about him not written in this book. He's not talking about, well, Matthew wrote about some things in Mark and Luke. I don't think he's talking about, I would think, the deity of Christ, which is his presentation of Christ, is so vast, is so magnificent, is so off the chart, you can't scale it, it's limitless. There's too many things that I, writing about him as deity, could not put all the things that God Almighty did in the person of Yeshua HaMashiach. And Yeshua HaMashiach, he did so many things. You have I cannot sit here and tell you all the details of things. I was given to write to you things that I was told to write to you, but I'm telling you, there's other things. That's what I think it's referring to. Now, one could argue to your point, well, he's talking about things written in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Nah, I don't go with that, because his book specifically is the book of John, granted. But his book is an emphasis on the deity of Christ. Again, referenced by the fact that he leaves out totally the birthing genealogy of Jesus. What's he start off with? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Excuse me. He starts right off, boom, he's God. Okay, I got it. I mean, he's just like, boom. And the world was darkness. They hated the light, I mean, he just goes right into who he is. Only begotten of the Father, filled with grace and truth. And the Word became flesh, dwelt among us. Only begotten. So he presents Jesus as God, deity. So I think when he says in this book, no, other things weren't, there were things that were written on this book, he's talking to the deity, the almighty, supreme authority of God, cannot be contained in the actions that he's done. Of course there's more miracles he did. He's God. I'm not going to record every detail in this book because I wasn't told to by God's hand. God informed me to write these things. That's what I think he's talking about, but I think he's not speaking to, oh, by the way, the other miracles that he did are all recorded in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And between those three and me, we're all good. That's all he did. I don't think he's saying that at all. I don't think that. I think he's speaking to his book, yes, but his book specific to the deity of Jesus cannot be contained in the many miracles he has done. That's what I think he's saying. But that's my take on that. But technically, from an applicational standpoint, exegesis standpoint, it's his book he's talking about, right? But then you have to speak of what's his book, encompass. Well, again, the deity of Jesus. What a coincidence that other writers didn't write this statement, but he did. And he's the one who writes about the deity of Jesus. Yeah, okay. So I think he's talking about that. Does that make sense to you? I don't know if that answers your question or your statement or your comment. It's a good comment. So here in chapter 21 of John, the reflection goes on, and he goes into this whole, after these things, Jesus manifested himself again to the disciples at the lake of Tiberias. And in this manner he appeared. Simon Peter and that Thomas called Didymus and that Nathanael of Cana in Galilee and the sons of Zebedee and the two others of his disciples were together. So there's 7 of them. Simon Peter says to them, I'm going fishing. They say to him, we will also go with thee. And they went out and entered into the boat, and during that night they caught nothing. But now morning being coming, Jesus stood on the shore. The disciples, however, knew not that it was Jesus. Then Jesus says to them, children, have you any food? They answered him, no. And again, they knew not that it was Jesus in verse 4. So again, how many times does Jesus have to veil himself at post-resurrection? At Mary Magdalene, thought he was the gardener. When the people on the road to Emmaus came back in Luke 24, they said that he appeared to Simon. He's like, no, he didn't. There's no record of that. I don't remember that. I would know that because he ran by him or walked past him not knowing he was the gardener. People on the road to Emmaus didn't know who he was. He veiled himself from them. And here he veils himself from them. How many times does he have to show you by his own practical relationship to how he communicates post-resurrection? Pre-resurrection and post-resurrection, our Lord communicates in a very different way that's not all the time direct. I don't know why churchianity can't get that through their head, but our Lord and our God and our Savior communicates in a way that he wants us to pay attention. He wants us to ruminate on the truth of who he is and what he has said so that we can put things together and then recall, our joy is being made complete because now we can actually be in tune with hearing our Father and talking with our Father. And so it's just interesting how he just does this again. And then, by the way, why are they fishing when I'd be doing different things myself after seeing this whole post-resurrected experience, which goes to the state of mind they were in. They went right back to their old business of fishing, not even thinking about, sharing and being witnesses, because that wasn't given to them as a message yet until the book of Acts. So this is in between that time between the week after Passover and Pentecost hasn't come yet. We're talking like we're somewhere between days 10 to 40 in here somewhere. They're just doing these things. And he says in verse 5, says to them, children, have you any food? They answered him, no. He said to them, throw the net on the right side of the boat and you will find. Then they threw it and they were no longer able to draw it from the multitude of fishes. That the disciples therefore who Jesus loved says to Peter, it is the Lord. Because remember, there's a multitude of fishes. So he says, disciple that Jesus loved says to Peter, it is the Lord. Then Simon Peter, having heard that it was the Lord, girded up his upper garment, for he was naked. Meaning again, he has lower garment on. He didn't have his over, because there's 3 garments. There's the undergarment over the actual underwear, we call it. Then there's a garment over that. We call it our t-shirt or slip for a woman. And then you have over that, you have your coat. So there's the outward coat, the inner coat, and then the undergarment itself. So the upper garment was the actual, like that over that white thin whole piece you would wear under your robe. That's what he's talking about. He girded on that, and then he just had his lower garment on, and he threw himself into the lake. But the other disciple came by the boat, for they were not far from the land, but about 200 cubits off, dragging the net with the fishes. You imagine they weren't having any fish. He says, children, cast your net. So as soon as a miracle's been done, right away, it's almost as if this is a lesson learned, that they're paying more attention now about who the truth is and what he has said. And John says, it's the Lord. It's like he immediately is like, no one, that doesn't happen unless that's God. It's like almost as if he now is more sensitized, more in tune with the will of God, with the voice of God, with the actions of God. That was the message here, not going through, and that's the overall message of faith, is that when you go through an experience of when you have what they had, he was more in tune with hearing from God and distinguishing what God's hand looks like. And he knew right away, this is God. So he says to Simon Peter, and he takes off, of course, in the lake. They're dragging this net. Verse 9 of John 21, when therefore they went out to land, they see a fire of coals lying and a fish lying on it and bread. Now again, it says they saw this. They went out to land, they see a fire, coals lying and a fish lying on it and bread. Jesus said to them, bring of the fishes which you just now caught. Simon Peter went on board and drew the net to the land full of great fishes, 153. And though there were so many, the net was not torn. Simon Peter went on board and drew the net. Now I want you to know something. Simon Peter smells the charcoal fire. The memory of betrayal comes back to him, what he did a few weeks earlier. How he said he didn't know him 3 times. How he felt. All those emotions came flooding back. Can you imagine what's on his face, what's in his heart as he walks back to the boat? He smells the fire. He's going, I get the fish. He's probably crying. Yes. And the Lord sees he's welled up, I'm sure. And then Jesus just says to him, come and breakfast. No one of the disciples presumed to ask him, who art you? Who art thou? Knowing he is the Lord. Jesus comes and takes the bread and gives to them and the fish in like manner. Yes?
Pam said, is the right side refer to power or God's will?
Yeah, so that goes back to Proverbs in chapter 3. So if you go to Proverbs 3, good question you asked me, the right side and the left side. So if you go to Proverbs in chapter 3, so you'll find in verse 16 the reference to this, to always make it clear for you to understand, to always know this. I get kind of mixed up myself. I'm just telling you for me. You're better than me remembering this stuff. But here, it's in verse 16 of Proverbs 3. For length of days and years of life, I'm reading from the Septuagint. For length of days and years of life are in her right hand, and her left hand riches and glory. So length of days and years of life is on the right hand. So it speaks to like Aeonian life and the abiding, whereas the left hand speaks to riches and glory, the blessings and the benefits of that years of life in Aeonian life. So that's Proverbs 3:16. So to your point, it's a great question and comment. So going back to John 21, as you read the rest of this chapter, as we finish out this book, it's our reflections. He says this is the 3rd time now, verse 14, that Jesus manifested the disciples having been raised from the dead. The 3rd time, meaning again, the upper room, the 8 days later, and now this appearance. When therefore they had breakfast, Jesus says to Simon Peter, Simon, by the way, interesting, he said, go tell the disciples to meet me at Galilee where I told them. So remember, he told them this earlier, they'd meet him at Galilee. That's where they were. So he's like, wait a second. So why were they on Galilee? He appeared in the room, but he didn't tell them he was going to be there, because the women told the apostles that he said he'll see you in Galilee where he told you he'd meet you, and he appears to them in a room. That's pretty cool. So there was veiled appearances that he didn't speak to. Again, wasn't directly said, but yet, again, I'm going to remind you of this. Let's go back and see that. You're probably thinking, what? Where do you say that at? So if you go back to Mark chapter 16 and verse 7, at the resurrection, but go say to his disciples and to Peter, he precedes you to Galilee. There you will see him as he said to you. Huh? So what does that speak to? Why does he tell you in Mark 16 verse 7, I'll see you in Galilee like I told you, but yet he appears to them in the room later on that night. And then again 8 days later. What's that speak to? 2 appearances unmentioned by the angels and taught by the women being told to tell the apostles a message. They weren't told, he'll see you tonight. They weren't told that. Why? Why? What does that speak to? It speaks to the fact that God does not reveal his truth to us all in advance and all disclosed. He veils things from us, and his word, like for example, people say, I don't see clearly how you can say to me that there's these watches mentioned in the New Testament where it's all like you're putting together like truths over here from the Old Testament and truths in the New Testament, and these waves of these raptures happening. I don't see it clearly. Do you think the apostles saw clearly he was going to appear to them in the room that night? No. Did they understand it clearly? Don't lie to me. No. Don't lie to yourself. There's no evidence, none, that they would have known he was coming to see him that night. Nor did they know he was coming 8 days later after that to come again to see him, but this time with Thomas present. What does that speak to? Again, that God veils his appearances, that when he will have these waves, God reveals that when he wants to reveal that to us. God veils that in his word for us to distinguish and understand. They should have discerned and understood. He's not going to just, wait until such a long time and not see you. Of course he's going to see you. So he just didn't say it, as if to kind of think about their relationship they had with him. Is he going to make us wait that long before we see him? Of course not. And he saw him that night. And again 8 days later. And after that, saw him at Galilee. I think it's just interesting things, again, no one speaks to, no one thinks about. Why did they not say, he'll see you tonight? That's what I would have said. If I was God talking to the angel to tell the women, to tell the apostles, tell him I'll see him tonight. Nope. Tell him I'll see him in Galilee. Why are you saying that? Because if you hit your eyes on the prize, if you keep your eyes on what's out ahead in the real moment of when he's going to again see you, from what he said, the things he didn't say to them, then if you keep your eyes on walking by faith and what's out ahead, then the steps of faith that happen in between what you know to be true and what he said to be true, you'll be in the right frame of mind and the spirit. All he was doing was getting them to think out ahead, to be in faith, to live in faith, to live out of faith, so that in between that moment and the moment out ahead, they be caught in the right mode of mindset and the right spirit to enjoy and to embrace this moment. So here he says in verse 15, when therefore they had breakfast with Jesus, saying to Simon Peter, Jesus says to Simon Peter, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me more than these? He says to them, or to him, yes, Lord, you know how I love you. Do you agape me? He says, yes, you know how I phileo you. He says, well then, feed my little lambs. He says to him again, a second time, Simon, now Jonah, do you love me? Do you agape me? He says to him, Lord, you know that I phileo you. He says this time, tend, care for my sheep. Not just my little lambs and feeding them. Now he says, care for my sheep. Verse 17, a third time, Simon, son of Jonas, do you affectionately love me? Do you love me? But this time he says, do you phileo love me? And he says, oh Lord, you know that I love you, that I phileo love you. And you thou knowest all things, and thou knowest that I love you, Lord. Jesus says to him, feed my sheep. Indeed, I truly say to you that when you were younger, you did gird yourself and walk where you did not wish. But when you are old, thou will extend your hands, and another will gird you and carry you where you will not wish. Do not wish. Now this he said, intimating by what death he would glorify God. And having said this, he says to him, follow me. So Jesus, having a conversation with Peter in front of 7 disciples, or 6 disciples, about this conversation, how embarrassing could he have felt? But why was he doing this? People forget the background, again, what I was saying to you. The reason Jesus is doing this is not embarrassing. He's not trying to call him out. Peter earlier smelled the charcoal fire, went to get the fish. It says that in verse 11. He went to go get the fish. The charcoal fire was burning in verse 9. He got the fish in verse 11. Jesus says, come, let's have breakfast. No one said, who are you? Because they knew it was him. They all knew it was Jesus. And then as he's feeding and they're having breakfast, then this conversation happens. I contend to you that at this breakfast, the apostles were loving life except for Peter. Peter was crying. His eyes were welling up And he was thinking back to the charcoal fire he had smelled when he betrayed his Lord. And he's thinking, how could you do this to me? One of the worst moments of my life. And I'm reliving this, if not the worst moment of my life. And Jesus already knew and ordained all of this. And Peter's reliving these emotions of despair, of trauma, of sadness, of heartache. And Jesus purposely, Yeshua purposely orchestrated the events to bring out the emotion, to give him healing. He wanted to draw it out of him, to then say, do you love me? And letting him know, I know that you love me to the best that you can as a sinner. I wasn't trying to call you out. He was pointing out to him, you could never love me the way you wanted to. You love me the way you were able to. And that's okay with me. All I ask of you is to feed my little lambs, tend my sheep, feed my sheep. Focus on what you can do for the others. Like I told you, Satan wants to sift you like wheat, but when you're restored, strengthen your brethren. Now he's holding true to how does he strengthen his brethren? By feeding his sheep, feeding his little lambs, tending his sheep, feeding his sheep. And he's letting him know before all that, don't worry about how you didn't love me. That was never the point. You could never love me the way I know you want to. You can only love me the way you're able to. You're a sinner saved by grace. Peter, I love you. It's okay. And so that moment was a huge restorative, counseling session Jesus had in front of the other 6 disciples. Talk about Christian counseling. Right there was your Christian. He took his brokenness and the moment and the remembrance and all the things around it and used it to him to remember now a beautiful moment of reconciliation and restoration and love and acceptance and compassion.